Hey guys, welcome back. Today I'm going over the 12.2 patch notes. I expected to cover this yesterday on a Tuesday, but they released the patch notes on a Wednesday, and I think the patch is coming out tomorrow. So that's kind of weird, but this patch is pretty big, so let's start going over the changes. Alright, so you can see there's a bunch of changes this patch. A lot of them are really small, but some of them are super impactful. Starting with Zeri. Zeri looks fun. I haven't played her yet. Hopefully I'll get some games in so I can do a review about her champ design, but she seems good against these melee deathball comps. She seems to kite really well. She looks really fun. I'm excited, but we can't really talk about power. We don't know how powerful she's going to come into the game. All right, Janna. So I'm not going to go over all these changes because this video would be an hour long, but mainly Janna is getting pushed away from this obnoxious poke champion in lane. Although her laning is weak, like she pokes a lot. And she's getting pushed more into this fast mage fantasy, this fast enchanter fantasy, where your E's are getting stronger over time instead of like happening more often. And your W's, you get to W less often, but they're more impactful. And your Q is better. Mainly, I think they're trying to make her actions more impactful instead of just like being this bot that just presses E over and over again. And you're significantly faster. We're talking like 10 to 15% move speed faster, which is cool. I think they're mostly pushing Janna in the direction that her fantasy kind of wants you to go. Like when you look at Janna, you see a fast character that makes these impactful tornadoes. Like you can hit big ones that hit multiple people and all this stuff. And they're pushing her more in that direction and less away from like sort of some obnoxious poke that she had. All right, Lulu. Lulu's not the best enchanter in the game, at least in solo queue right now. Like Soraka and Sona are much better, I would say. But Lulu has been really strong for a long time. I think this nerf is really small. It's just one cooldown or 1 second on her cooldown increased at all ranks. But W in a lot of fights is not an ability that you're using on cooldown. You're waiting for somebody to come dive and like then you hold it for that polymorph. And in abilities that you hold like that and don't use on cooldown, when their cooldown is increased by 1 second, it's really not that big of a deal. But I think this is mainly kind of a nudge to like hopefully get people to ban her less because her ban rate is super high. But overall, I think that's mostly what this is. It's just like she's been strong for a long time. Her ban rate's super high, so let's give her a really small nerf. But I like it. Anyways, Nocturne. So Nocturne sucks. The big thing about Nocturne is he was one of the very few champions that got the short end of the stick with lethal tempo. He actually really liked the play pattern of the old lethal tempo where he would R in, auto attack once, and then follow somebody with his E until the fear went off, and then that burst of attack speed would kick in and he would try to one-shot you or just burst you down with that immense amount of attack speed. Now he's actually just really bad at stacking the new lethal tempo. He's much better with Conquer because he can stack it better and, he can not abuse it, but he can't abuse the new lethal tempo. And his win rate with Conquer is at least 3% higher. But they are buffing him for 10 health growth a level, and QAD ratio is going up by 10%. The health is nice because he's actually pretty good with Sterax. I think his best build is like Stride Breaker into Sterax into like Black Cleaver. And then a Q buff on the AD is nice. I like that they're buffing like health and stuff and not pushing him into any sort of assassin that they could do, but I don't think is the best direction for him. So I like this buff. I think his win rate, once people realize that lethal tempo is bad on him, is going to go up a decent amount. His Conqueror win rate is already around 50% or something. All right. So Kiana, 1 second. Kiana's base health regeneration is going down by 1.5, and her Q duration on her grass, like her invisibility, is going down by 0.5 seconds. This is a decent nerf for her mid lane with the health regeneration. It's actually pretty small. I don't know how much it's going to matter, but the Q invisibility timer is mostly just a quality of life change. I would like to see more of these invisibility timers in the game reduced. Some invisibilities are permanent, which is beyond me, but I like that they're reducing invisibility timers. I think it's a good change and a healthy one for the game. And Kiana sort of deserves a nerf. I mean, her mid lane win rate is pretty high. All right, Rengar. So Rengar, they're allowing him to jump when he's camouflaged. This is mostly quality of life. I mean, it's obviously going to buff his power a sixth of the time on the Chemtech map, where all of your bushes would disappear and be replaced with the Chemtech stuff, which is nice to see. It also maybe opens up opportunities for like Senna, Rengar, cheese strats in bot lane. I don't know if this works with Duskblade. I kind of hope it does, because that would be funny. If you could go invisible and then immediately leap on somebody with the Duskblade passive. But we'll see. I'm not sure if that works, but I like the change. Samira. All right, so her R damage is going up by 5 per shot at all ranks. This makes her level 6 spike even harder. Ever since the rework, Samira's been mostly about that level 6 spike and getting a good fight and snowballing the game off of that. Like as soon as you hit level 2 or level 6, you need to get a good 2v2 and hopefully a kill, and then you can snowball that lead because you always have your R, unlike other champions. Now that R spike is harder, it's more powerful, and like her damage in all stages of the game is more powerful. I think this is a sizable amount of damage and is more than it seems, and I imagine this is a pretty decent buff. I mean, she's been nerfed with like the Conqueror nerf and the Immortal Shield Bow nerf, so she was due for a buff. I think she was a pretty low power champion. All right, Senna. Senna is getting a huge change. I mean, before she mainly relied on Glacial Augment to get souls, and now it's much harder to get souls. I mean, people have to basically be standing still to get them now. In order to, proc that soul grab off of the enemies. But now they're giving kind of her Glacial Augment back with her Q. So now you're going to Q auto instead of auto Q, and you're going to be able to farm souls that way. I see no reason why this is not the same amount of power to both support and AD carry. Also, it scales with AD and AP, but it scales with AD, so the AD carry Senna, I think, gets more AD, so that's nice. I think AD carry Senna has been on the up and up and has been trending, and the win rate has been increasing, and I expect this to maybe even push her into like a dominant position in the meta. Wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't happen, but I kind of expect it to. This is a big change. All right, Shen. So Shen has been powerful for a really long time. He's a really good counter pick. He got a lot out of that new teleport change. He can now teleport down to the bot lane with his R, and his laner can't follow him with their own teleport in the early game. He could do that. He had that super unique power while still being able to deal a bunch of damage and find lethal and surprising ways in lane. He kind of had the best of both worlds, especially in the good matchups. And I think it's right to keep that unique, epic aspect about him in his ult and kind of nerf the damage part, which is what they did. They removed 1% max health damage off of his Q at every rank. So good change. I like it. His win rate was absurdly high and was only going up because people found a new build with like Demonic Embrace. But anyways, I like this change. So for Tomek, they're slightly nerfing his top lane power, and they're really buffing his support power. This is a change where when people are showing interest in playing a character in a role and they're really not giving up no matter what the win rate is, like people are still trying to play Tomek support, you should incentivize those players to play it more. I mean, if they want to play it and it's really weak, like you should buff it, just like you buff any champion in any role that's super weak. If Jinx has a 46% win rate, you buff Jinx. So I think if people want to play Tomek support, you should buff it until it's balanced. Anyways, they are increasing the Q slow by 10%. This is pretty decent for both top and support, I would say. And the E, they're making it so that you really only get the same amount of E stacks if there are 2 people visible, which means that, in top lane. He's still, when you gank Tomek, he's still going to keep the same amount of survivability. So he's still going to be super hard to gank because there's going to be the jungler and the top laner. But in lane, he's going to be a little bit easier to kill if you're playing him top lane. Also, they're compensating his sustain a little bit by increasing this percentage. For support, this is actually just a buff to his sustain, but for top lane Tahm Kench, this is kind of a compensation buff, given that you're getting a lot less health, or a lot less gray health. And the R, they completely changed the functionality. I mean, they gave it 100 more, or 100 into like 300 more shields at every level. Like 300 shields at level, at the rank 3, which on support you're never going to get. But they made it so he actually speeds up when he swallows a teammate instead of slows down. This is a huge functionality change, and allows you, if you're playing him support, you can grab your beefy top laner that would normally be you as the Tahm Kench and bring him into the enemy team with that move speed. It also makes it so it's going to be harder to kill you and your teammate in lane. It's better peel. Overall, I think this is a pretty decent change. I think his win rate, it will probably stay pretty high in top lane, but I expect support Tahm Kench to be at least playable. They might have to buff him again, and I'm glad that they're supporting him, because people obviously want to play him in that support role. All right, for Talon, they're decreasing his bonus damage against monsters by 25%. This could maybe kill Talon jungle. I mean, Talon has a super high ban rate, especially in high MMR. He has one of the fastest clears, at least in the mid game, that like you just incinerate camps. And I don't know how this affects his first clear, or I assume it makes his mid game clears a lot slower. But it could make him, it's definitely going to kill him in pro play. He might still be picked up in solo queue because people do whatever they want. All right, moving on to Tristana. So Tristana's been a little weak ever since they removed 2 AD from her. And they gave her stats that she actually really cares about. So they gave her 41 health up to 600. This is like Jinx territory. This is some of the highest base health in the game, if I'm not wrong. And she uses health really well because she can use it defensively like every other AD carry, but she can also use it aggressively by committing her body to a play. Having more health is like really important when you're full sending your plays like that, especially in like your early game 2v2s. And her base health regen is going up by like a tiny amount. I doubt this will be noticeable, but Tristana does take more poke than other AD carries because she doesn't have abilities to clear the wave from a long range. All right, and I expect Tristana to maybe go up 1%, but I like that they're buffing her. She's pretty weak right now. All right, Veigar. Veigar is getting a Q buff, and it's pretty big. It's going down by 1 second at all ranks, the cooldown. It's going down by 1 second at all ranks, and you're getting more stacks from minions. I think this is from large minions, like cannon minions, like large minions and large monsters and large minions. So I think this is only cannons. This is actually a big change. I mean, in lane, there's a lot of times where a minion is about to die and you don't have your Q up yet and you have to auto attack. A decent amount of time now you're going to have your Q up and you're going to be able to stack more often. In fights, mostly the Q cooldown doesn't matter that much, but if you do have to burn through a tank, a cooldown that's this short, getting reduced by 1 second, is a pretty big deal for melting through those tanks. It'll allow you to Q more often. So I like this change. Veigar was a little weak now that Predator was nerfed. His win rate's decent, but I expect him to come back a lot and be pretty powerful. There's a way bigger change than it seems. All right, Volibear. So Volibear is in a pretty shit state, at least for top lane. In jungle, his win rate is kind of low. But his base attack damage growth is going up by 0.5 at every level, and his E cooldown is going down. So both of these changes matter a lot more for top lane. This E cooldown, I don't think will affect his first clear or even his later clears, but it will affect his laning. I mean, sometimes he just E's on cooldown to try to hit you. And the attack damage growth matters a lot for Sunderer because Sunderer cares about base AD, and you're going to get more out of it in top lane. It's a small amount, mind you. Like, is it even a longsword at some point? It's barely a longsword at level 18, but it's not even a longsword at level 18, but it's something. So I'm glad they're buffing him, because a champion as easy as Volibear should be at a decent win rate, or should be hovering at around a decent win rate at most times. But he's kind of going through this transition of being a Chemtech abuser, or an old Chemtech abuser, to like the Sunder or Bruiser type of champion. All right, Yasuo and Yone. We'll cover them both. So Reddit and Twitter kind of freaked out about this when they saw that these guys were getting buffed. This is a pretty small buff. These champions' win rates were recovering, which suggests that people were trying them due to their interactions with the new lethal tempo. But they did get nerfed with the Immortal Shield Bow nerf, and obviously with tempo getting nerfed. One thing about Yasuo and Yone is that they actually give up a lot more when they give up Conquer than other champions. They cared about that healing a lot more. So it's a much bigger opportunity to cost to play lethal tempo. Obviously, lethal tempo is better, or is really good on them, especially Yone. But Conquer was also amazing on them. I mean, they had one of the best interactions with the keystone in the game. But this is a really small nerf. I think it's a really small buff. I think their win rates are going to go back to normal. And I don't think they're overpowered or anything crazy like that. This also doesn't buff their Berserker's Greave spike too much, which I like. That no matter how weak these guys are, as soon as they buy Berserker's Greaves, they're like the most powerful champion in the game for at least 4 to 5 minutes. All right. So Zed is getting 35% off of his AD ratio on his R. This is just like the ending damage that the R does. This doesn't affect his kind of increased damage from all of the damage that you do, like his repeat damage. I don't think it affects that at all. But he does lose a decent amount of damage. I think at Serrated Dirk, he loses about 30 to 40 damage on his R, and at 2 items, he loses around 100 damage, depending on your runes, off of his R. And his R is one of the most uninteractive, like, toxic play patterns in the game, so I'm glad it's seeing a nerf. I think they also need to nerf his poke in lane a bit, because if you accidentally get hit by, like, a double Q, your health is gone. But maybe you just shouldn't ever get hit by that. Anyways, I like to see his R nerfed. Zed was a little strong. Not anything crazy, but he is just like terrible to play against. And this isn't going to matter too much late game. If you're playing an 80 carry or a squishy mage with no armor items built, you're still going to die to this all the time. But in lane, you're going to survive a lot more often with like 1 health or 10 health or whatever than you used to before. So I like that. He's going to have to do a lot more to kill you in lane. All right, so Lichbane is another big change. I mean, they're basically changing the functionality of the item from a super burst-heavy item to a real Spellblade item, akin to Essence Reaver or Trinity Force or what have you. They're changing the build path and giving it ability haste from 0 to 15. And the Spellblade damage is... The AD is getting halved, or at least the ratio on the base AD is getting halved. But the AP ratio is going up by 10%. I think you have to have like 600 AP to make this even out, but the cooldown is down by 1 second. So the burst you have to have, that one cooldown, you have to have 600 AP to make it the same amount of damage. But the cooldown's going down by 1 second, and this completely changes how the item works. You're going to build it on way more champions. Maybe something like Evelynn is actually disincentivized to build this now, but things like Kale, now Kale has a nice third item aside from, like building Rabadon's third. And maybe Ezreal could go way more into AP now. Things like, I think Fizz and Echo will still take this item, but there's a lot of champions that you could try this on, and it's going to be interesting to see kind of where it lands. A lot of AP champions are kind of missing a third item, or a second item, or a really good one that's super consistent. And this might be it. They might find it with this one. All right, Rallies. So Rallies is going down by 400 gold, from 3,000 to 2,600, I believe. And its ability power is going down by 25 and health up by 50. The problem with Rallies is that a lot of mages already slow people with their abilities. So the added slow doesn't do that much. It's kind of like why would you build this item if your abilities are already slowing people? Where like on AD champions, especially something like Ezreal or Varus, like they care about the slow because their abilities don't slow already. At least not on Rallies, but on something like Sorelda's Grudge. For this, compared to Sorelda's Grudge, this also only gives you 2 different stats. I mean, it gives you ability power and health. It doesn't give you ability haste. It doesn't give you like magic pen or whatever. It probably shouldn't give you magic pen if it gives you health, but it's kind of narrow in who, like, what champions in the cast could use it well. But they are opening that up by decreasing the amount of gold, so maybe they're opening it up to more support champions to buy. They can afford this item more often. It's on the level of the cost of the items that they usually build. Maybe things like Brand and Seraphine can build this now more consistently. I think the more AP bruisers are going to like that they added health and the decreased cost, like Singed and Mordekaiser that already use this, but champions that were kind of considering it, like Cassiopeia and Rise, probably don't like this change as much with the way less AP. I mean, 15 is a pretty big deal. So yeah, that's mostly what I think about this. I think maybe this item needs to get completely changed eventually because it just works with so few champions in the cast. All right, Turbo Chemtech. I'm kind of mad about this one because I saw this Akali build with Turbo Chemtech like 2 days ago, and I haven't gotten to try it yet, and it's already getting changed. So that's kind of bullshit. I'm gonna declare that right now. But I think they should have kept it for one more patch. Maybe that's selfish, but it does kind of cross the line from a creative use of an item that wasn't intended to just direct abuse. If you don't know, Akali was building this to kind of abuse it with the fact that her R and her E make her travel a bunch of units and she would get a bunch of stacks. But now that is getting changed, and you can only get a maximum of 10 stacks per movement command, which I believe just means if you dash, you can only get 10 stacks out of it. So it probably kills this on Akali. Unlucky. I didn't get to try it. But maybe they should have just kept this around for one patch to let everybody have their fun before they changed it. I don't know. It's hard to say with things like this. It shouldn't affect anything other than that Akali build. All right, Chemtech. So I'm going to use this to talk a little bit about Chemtech Soul and the Rift in general. So they're nerfing the Soul, they're nerfing the health and the amount of time that you stay a zombie. And for the Rift, they're making it so that you go invisible less often, and or kind of you have to wait longer to camouflage again. And they're increasing the bonus damage. So for the Soul, I like Dragon Souls that are powerful, like Infernal Soul and Earth Soul, or the Mountain Soul and the Hextech Soul even. But this is the power that kind of just changes the way that you have to play against it. Like, at least as Infernal Soul, it's like, okay, it's going to be really hard to beat them, but the fights don't change. Like, you don't have to play differently, and nothing is kind of upsetting. But against Chemtech Soul, it's like, we got to kill them twice now? Like, that's just annoying as the enemy team. And any Soul is going to feel good, right? But you don't want it to, like, it already feels bad to be super far behind and, like, your enemies have a Soul. You don't want that to also be like a terrible experience to play against. So they said they were willing to change this or rework it if people really don't like it even after these changes. I think another potential change they could do is increase the animation time to revive, so people have longer to run away from the dead body. But other than that, they may need to rework it. We'll see. And for the Chemtech Rift, it is the opposite. This might be a hot take, but I really like this terrain. It's the only kind of elemental rift that I think makes a real impact on the game and lets you do things differently than you would in other games. It is a bit annoying, and I think they're trying to cut down on the annoyance by increasing the camouflage timer. But other than that, it adds a lot of variety into the game, and if every elemental rift was like that, each game would feel so much different, at least, moving around the map wise. So I think that Chemtech Rift is not the problem. It's the other elemental rifts that need to catch up to its game design. Things like Hextech Rift, those portals barely matter. They just like cut the distance that it takes to get back into your jungle mostly. And obviously all the other rifts barely matter at all. So I'd like to see more of the rifts look more like Chemtech Rift. All right, for Hextech, they nerfed the soul. They nerfed the damage down by like 25% at max level. This makes sense if that soul's win rate was too high. I think nerfing the damage makes sense because the fantasy about this soul is that you get to like chain slow people, and the damage is not really that much a part of that fantasy, so it makes sense that that's the thing they nerfed. All right, for lethal tempo, they changed it from a static 13 and 7% for melee and ranged, respectively, to scaling with level. You'll notice that it goes from 10 to 15% for melee, but it's for levels 1 through 15. And for ranged, it goes from 5 to 9% for levels 1 through 12. Now, this is great for AD carries because they don't get as many levels. So it makes sense that, they only need to get to 12 to reach this maximum. Speaking of AD carries, they like this change. I mean, they weren't abusing the early attack speed that much in the early game at early levels. So they don't really care that their early game has been nerfed. They get an extra 12% at max stacks in the late game. And they really don't become champions or like turn on and become super impactful until the late game anyways. But early game champions that were abusing the fact that they had lethal tempo in the top lane and their enemy top laner could kind of take these extended 1v1s and be super likely to win because of this additional attack speed, and they're kind of nerfing that in the early game. So I think top laners like this change a lot less than AD carries. AD carries should be happy about this change, and top laners should, at least the ones that were using lethal tempo champions, are disappointed because this is really a nerf for them. All right, so A-Rurf is back. That's cool. I've never played it, but nice. Sona's getting a visual overhaul. I've seen it. It looks decent. I like it. Vayne, I didn't know was getting a VFX update, but that's pretty cool to see. She has a pretty decently old model, although I don't know if that's getting updated, and her visuals could use some work, so I like that. Bug fixes. There's a bug in the game right now that doesn't allow you to evolve Kai'Sa's abilities when you should be able to, and I did not see that listed here, so that's kind of annoying. I don't know when they're going to fix that, but I've reported it multiple times. I assume other people have too, so hopefully that gets fixed soon. And then skins, there's a bunch of them. I think it's for the Lunar New Year, but they all look pretty cool. Other than that, this patch is super huge. The main takeaways and the main effects of this patch are, I think, Senna, and she's not in the patch notes, but Kale. Kale, benefits a lot from these lethal tempo changes, and maybe she builds Lichbane. The new Lichbane third, and also the Lichbane itself. I think these three things are getting pretty big buffs, and I expect to see them a lot. Also, in more niche cases, I think Veigar and maybe Nocturne are going to see more play. And Tomek's support I expect to be playable, not good, but probably fine. Anyways, I'll see you guys later. That was it for patch 12.2. I should be making a Zeri champion design review sometime soon. Subscribe if you want to see more content, and have a great day. Bye.